Well, good afternoon, friends and members of St. Martin Lutheran Church. Today is the 22nd, the month of March, the year 2022. We are in this week, we are celebrating the fourth Sunday in Lent, and our scripture, our gospel lesson for today is from Luke 15, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Today, we're going to kind of take a thematic look at the parable itself, kind of focusing on one aspect of it. Tomorrow, we're going to take a more kind of detailed look at the scriptures and the context in that. Such a rich parable. So much we could say and talk about in this parable. So many things that it speaks to in our life about families and God and loss and gain, and it's so rich. There's a reason why this is perhaps one of the most famous parables that Jesus teaches. It's very rich. Lots to talk about. I wanted to share. I had the honor this afternoon of meeting with Pastor Farouk Khan from Pablo International Ministries, People of the Book Ministries. Pablo International is a personal ministry partner of St. Martin, so we work and support with them individually as well as with the LCMS. And our hope is to have Pastor Khan visit St. Martin later this year. Don't exactly know when. We're working out some dates so that he can share specifically their ministry to the Muslim community in 7 different states and over 43 different venues across the country, all the way from Southern California to Michigan and beyond. So in your daily prayers, include Pablo Ministry in them as well, as they seek to preach the gospel to all people, and as well as to the Muslim community in our country. So we are in Luke 15, our gospel for this week, the fourth Sunday in Lent, and we begin at the 11th verse. Luke 15, beginning at verse 11. And he, Jesus, said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his field to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Then they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. As he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing, and he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother is come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, probably the most famous story that Jesus ever told, and it starts, we learn that there was a man who had two sons. And the story deals with many things. There are so many different aspects we could focus on here. But we're going to focus on one aspect, and that is the issue that connects all of the three characters in the story. And that is the story of loss. Of loss. And that theme of loss, that feeling of loss, is something that is profound in our community. That loss is something that can take on many different forms. You know, they're what we would call routine forms of loss. We kind of get used to it, right? Tiny increments of loss, loss of memory and balance and strength, patience. You know, when my mind goes to those sort of normal ideas of loss, one of the things that brings to mind, and this was brought to mind by a seminary professor of mine, Dr. Craig Kester, years ago when I was in seminary, is you go to any elementary school, right? You walk down the hallway and you go into the school office, and probably prominently placed in the school office, there's going to be a big cardboard box, and when you look in the box, you're going to find an array of items inside. Winter hats. One of them maybe even has a Lions logo on it. A single glove, worn out and ready to be thrown away. Maybe a lunchbox with a Disney character on it or a Marvel character on it. An unnamed spiral-bound notebook with a torn cover. And you look on the side of that box, and you're going to see in very precise handwriting that school secretaries tend to have, lost and found. And every object inside is unique, and every object has a story. You know, kids don't set out to lose things, but they do. They lose things when their minds are on other things. You know, I think about my own kids, right? They go to school. Mom always tells you to dress warmly for school, and you have recess, and it's a warm fall day, and you don't think of the winter hat that you'd stuffed in your pocket. After all, you know, Mom told you to wear it, but it kind of messes up your hair, so you don't like to. It wasn't your idea. You don't need it. It's too warm for a hat, but it's there, and you kind of forget about it, and you're thinking about recess and all the fun things you do in recess, and you're running around, you're on the playground, you march back into school, and unbeknownst to you, because your mind is on other things, there is your winter hat lying in the mud. And then it doesn't occur to you until you're almost home, and you reach into that pocket, and you realize the hat is gone. Now, for the young person, for you're the young person in this second parable I'm telling. It's not a big deal, you know, except for the fact that this is the fourth hat you've lost this winter, which means another trip to Meijer, if they're even selling hats anymore, and a lecture from Mom and Dad that there's going to be no more winter hats after this one. But you know it's an empty threat because you're going to get another one. It's not the end of the world, though, right? Life goes on. Life goes on. But there are bigger losses that are part of bigger stories. And it's when we lose things that matter, it does something to us. The younger son in Jesus' parable. You know, we don't often think about this. You know, we kind of think of him as being impudent and all that and kind of being a brat. But he has lost a lot. He didn't mean to, but it happened. And it all started when he asked the old man for his share of the property early. In a sense, saying to his dad, you know, I know normally inheritance are given after there's a death, but I want it now. In a sense, saying to his dad, you're better off dead, because all I want from you is what you're going to give me when you're dead, so just give it to me now. He wanted it, and he wanted it now, and for some reason, against societal norms of the day, Dad gave it to him. Gave him his property, he liquidated it, and he was on his way. He had places to go, people to see. He'd been given a lot, and he lost a lot. And he lost it when his mind was focused on other things. Eventually, he lost his money. He lost all of his friends who were ironically only around probably because he had money. And in the very end, he lost maybe the most important thing, and that was his self-respect. And what a painful thing it is, and I think we've all been here, when you realize that your problem or problems are your own fault, that it's your own flaws and failings that have caused it. It's a very painful thing to have to say, I've done it. I'm to blame. And as the son says, I'm no longer worthy. I'm no longer worthy to be called a son. I'm no longer worthy. That I've lost so much and that I'm no longer worthy in my own eyes. I'm no longer worthy in the eyes of my Father. I'm no longer worthy in the eyes of my God. And the years of our life are a gift. Are a gift. We know this. Till we spend them and wonder where it all went. We didn't mean to squander it, but sometimes we do. The younger son goes from a mansion to a casino to a pig pen. But most of us, when our connection to the younger son is most of us at some time manage to lose something that matters. Do we not? A friendship comes and goes, a marriage begins and then fails. You don't start out thinking it's going to be lost, but then it is. The loss of a job, the loss of a dream, we didn't set out to lose them, but we do. And in the case when we find out that it's our own flaws that are central to the loss, to the problem, we know what it means to say the words of the younger son, that I'm no longer worthy. So that's what the younger son lost. He lost his self-worth. That's the first face of loss in the story. The second face of loss is the older brother. Now, you might not think he's lost anything, but he has. You know, the older brother enters the parable after the younger son returns and is given a party fit for a visiting royalty. And that's where Jesus says in his story that the elder son became angry and he refused to join in the celebration. And the father pleaded with him. He pleaded with him, but the elder son said, look, all these years I've been working for you like a slave, and I never disobeyed your command once. And yet I don't even get a goat to celebrate with my friends. But this young son of yours goes off and wastes his money on prostitutes, and you throw him this big party. You might wonder, what is it that the elder son has lost? The one who stayed home. Well, he kept working. And it's only when the younger son came back that the older son saw what he had lost. What had he lost? Well, his sort of view on reality, because it's at this point that he sees himself as a chump. That he'd been a sap for all these years. That the irresponsible kid, right, sees the world. He stays home and sees nothing. The younger son goes to the parties, but not the older one. The younger son spends his time with wine and women and song, and the elder son spends his time in the drudgery and the mundane daily routine of work that we all feel from time to time. Work that never seems to change, never seems to go anywhere. In the end, the older son is concluding that what I do doesn't matter, that my obedience doesn't matter, that because I didn't get these extra rewards that the younger son is getting, it doesn't matter. In his mind, he's probably wondering, when you play by the rules, you get nothing. When you break the rules, you get a party. Here's the problem. You can't live on resentment, which is what the older son is trying to do. You can't live on resentment any more than you can live on a feeling of worthlessness. Neither one of them give or sustain life. Neither resentment from the older son and neither worthlessness. So the younger son has lost his self-worth. The older son has sort of lost his picture of how the world works. And then there's the third face of loss, and that, of course, is of the father. And what did the father lose? Well, he tells us repeatedly in the parable, he lost a child. The feeling of the loss of a child is every parent's worst nightmare. And that nightmare extends to extended losses, or even loss for a brief moment when as a parent, that little girl or that little guy walking along your side, the one that counts on you for everything they need, and all of a sudden you turn and they're not there. And even for parents who've gone just through a brief moment of loss, you realize that in that moment, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters than being reunited with that child. And that feeling doesn't change whether the child is 6 months or 22 years old. It doesn't change. And it's funny because the anguish that parent feels, and you're reunited with your child, right? And again, maybe it's just even for a brief time, and a lecture may follow, but sort of that irritation and everything is drowned out by the fact that you got the child back. And oftentimes the child isn't even aware of the anguish of the parent. They just kind of continue on in the moment. That the father's anguished love doesn't stop because the child is unaware. It continues in the background. And sometimes you see it breaking forth when the younger son, sort of absorbed in his own self-worthlessness, finds the father running to him. The father runs to him in compassion and kisses him before he even gets his confession out. Or when the elder son turns away from him, absorbed in his own anger and resentment, the father runs to him as well. The father runs to both sons. The impotent younger son, as well as the resentful older son. The father runs to both of them. And that's what the father does. He leaves the party. He leaves the party and he goes out to meet the older son. And what do we learn? Of course, the father, representing God, will not permit the worthless or the resentful to have the last word. He runs out to meet each one of them. And if you have resentment on one end of the spectrum and worthlessness on the other, sort of all of the other feelings you and I can experience are found within that spectrum. And no matter where you find yourself on that, God runs to us. See, what Jesus is doing in this parable, amongst many things, is he's showing us the face of God, who comes to you in your sense of worthlessness, in your sense of anger, ambivalence, and he says, you are mine. You're mine. And that is where Jesus shows us the face of God, who turns to us who have lost all kinds of things, small things and also things that matter. And he looks to us in our loss and he says, you are mine. And why does this understanding of God matter? It matters because you matter. And ultimately, when we wonder what God's attitude is for us, it's at that moment. If we doubt what God thinks of us, if you doubt what God thinks of you, then we look to the cross. We look to the cross. Because that is God demonstrating ultimately what he thinks about you. That he loves you so much that he sent his son to die for you. And I think one of our callings as Christians, and this is a calling we have as a priesthood of all believers, every single one of us has this calling to make that known to the world, that they belong and that they have a hope and they have a place with the Father. Maybe that's our only job as Christians, is to show that hope by what we say and by what we do. Well, tomorrow we'll take a very closer look at the parable itself and kind of look at some of the language in the Greek and in the Hebrew and some of the connections to the Old Testament. But just, this focus this afternoon is simply on loss and how loss permeates this parable. And yet, to all of us who have lost, the Father runs to us and reminds us that you are mine, and I've proven that through my Son. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. Receive the Lord's blessing. Be a blessing to others. I love you guys, and I will see you all very soon. God bless.